I am 33 years old, 170 centimeters tall and weigh 60 kilograms. I love to stay active and I have two brothers who have also started their own families. We are a very close-knit family group and we often have guests over and organize small get-togethers at home. It was on one of these occasions that I met Matus, a student who was in the last cycle of secondary school and was preparing for his university entrance exams. He is the fruit of my sister's partner's first relationship, a fair-skinned boy with soft features and approximately 175 centimeters tall, with a slender build and an introspective air, probably with few romantic experiences. My partner has always been open to new experiences, because our connection and the certainty of our affections make it easier. We usually meet up to experience our fantasies, worrying about the others around us, sometimes even the neighbors, in public places. But one desire in particular left me ecstatic, the idea of sharing moments with someone younger. Ever since our stay in Fortaleza, where I lived this fantasy with two young people we met on the seafront, we talked a lot about what happened and always thought about repeating the experience. We then began to imagine, in a fanciful way, of course, the possible candidates in our neighborhood. And then, on May 5th of this year, we were invited to the birthday celebration of one of my sisters. The atmosphere was welcoming, full of relatives, many couples with their descendants and others with their grandchildren. Among the kids was Matus, always helpful, helping to distribute treats to those present. He walked around the house, and every now and then he would pass by where we were, chatting about trivial things, while I hugged my partner. That was when, spontaneously, my partner suggested to me, "How about including him?" I pretended not to understand and he clarified, "How about we share a moment with him, or how about you let yourself go?" At that moment, a wave of emotions flooded me. I could feel the heat of the blood flooding my face. My reaction was to hug and kiss my partner with intense joy, perhaps in an instinctive act of acceptance. The restlessness I felt for the rest of the party was only justified by the now very palpable possibility of meeting someone else, and someone younger. To understand what I am describing, it is necessary to experience a similar situation. At the end of the night, we decided that the decision to go ahead with this idea would be up to him. Matus would only leave the next day to catch the bus back to his city, where his father would pick him up after work. My partner, thinking quickly, made up an excuse that he needed to travel to the region to take care of work matters and could offer the boy a ride to the bus station. Everyone agreed, and I, just watching, felt a sensation that I had never known before, without words to describe it. We left around 2 a.m. Our vehicle had plenty of room for Matus to settle in and rest during the drive to our home, which was about 40 minutes away. Everything was being planned by my partner, my accomplice, with whom I was drunk with anticipation. On the way back, when the boy was already asleep, I started asking him how we would proceed, without any kind of pressure. He simply replied that we would act according to the naturalness of the moment. We agreed and continued. We arrived home at almost 3 a.m. and, after a relaxing and somewhat tense bath, my partner went to the living room, where he found our guest watching some random program on TV and claiming that he had lost sleep. I, dressed in a light and transparent nightgown, entered the living room and sat between them on the couch. My partner still seemed undecided, but I could see the flame of excitement in his eyes. I then decided to turn off the last light in the room and adjust the brightness of the television to a softer tone, so that we would feel more comfortable. My partner looked at me and smiled, understanding the message. After another 2 or 3 minutes of privileged observation, Matus could not take his eyes off the subtle movements of my body. So, in a provocative attitude and still pretending to be asleep, I moved closer to the boy, drawing my legs up so that my hips were almost touching his side, completely within reach of his hands. I controlled myself so as not to squirm. The young man must have noticed, because, with a more audacious attitude, He put his hand out and began to lightly caress what was being offered, until he reached where I wanted. Without taking his hand away, he began to comfort himself with his other hand, under his clothes. In the meantime, my partner moved discreetly on the sofa, to better observe that intimate scene. I began to sigh with the caresses I received. The young man played with my intimate part using one and sometimes two fingers, delicately, and in a situation of loss of control, I began to place my legs on top of him, pressing my pelvis against his waist, while moving like a gentle dancer. At this point, I believed that Matus was already fully aware of our intentions and no longer hesitated. He buried himself as far as he could and, with his hand dirty with me, touched himself, with an expression of perplexity and fascination, breathing heavily and with his lips half open. I, extremely excited, released liquid from my passage while I moved in his hand, repeating softly, "I want him, my love, I want him now." He probably also heard my whispers, made for about 2 or 3 minutes, the time it took my partner to think about how to continue with that unimaginable act. As the boy alternated his fingers on the rare jewel and its surroundings, I began to ask again, now almost whispering, "I want it, I want it, I want it now, do you allow it, do you allow it?" My partner suggested that he go relax while we talked. And so we did. When we got to the living room, we found Matus wearing the same shirt after his shower, showing some anxiety. I asked him why, and he said he was nervous. At that moment, my partner put an end to any doubts. For him, despite being very enthusiastic, there was no room for exclusion, whatever the situation. So, always thinking quickly, I suggested that we all go to the bedroom and that my partner would just watch from afar. Without further hesitation, the boy followed us, and when we arrived, he was already taking off his clothes and sitting on the bed. At that moment, in total silence, I shook my man's hand. I could feel the high temperature due to his excitement for the imminent achievement. And it was only for this reason, for my happiness, that he agreed to wait, sitting in a small armchair, about 2 meters from the head of the bed, from where I could see Matus sitting on the edge of the mattress, supported by his hands behind his slender body, and with his incredibly erect shaft pointing to his navel. Trembling, I approached with indescribable voluptuousness, like a longing lover, exchanging caresses. I went down until I found again what my mouth was longing for. I stayed there until he showed signs that he was about to surrender. I looked at him tenderly and said, "Calm down, calm down." The impression I had was that we should have done this a long time ago. My intimate part was totally excited, eager for attention. I turned and invited Matus to join me. He positioned himself behind and, somewhat awkwardly, directed the coupling towards the entrance of the goal of life, and little by little he entered, exploring, getting to know that cave for the first time. His first cave. He seemed to be enchanted by exploring those damp walls with his torch, like a fearless young explorer. He went deep and came back, and with each return, the desire to go further grew. When he reached the edge of the cave, he retreated to catch his breath, but his sword was increasingly vigorous and dirty, realizing that those fluids facilitated his exploration, but also signaled his imminent climax. I began the delicate work of making his task more challenging, slowly moving my body. We stayed together. I allowed him to hold me by the waist so that our movements synchronized. He was almost filling the cave. I asked him to lie down with his chest up. I grabbed his weapon and engaged mine, reconnecting us and warming us up again. It only took 4 or 5 of my movements for the boy to despair. I stopped and looked at my partner, asking, "Do you want to join in too?" At first, he didn't understand the suggestion, but he was already getting up and approaching. I then, in a frenzy, resumed the dance I was saying. "Come on, Matus, this is how it's done." The boy accelerated the fallottio and reached the climax. I could feel the spasms, He was already exhausted. But I still wasn't completely satisfied. My love, who was standing, seemed stunned, unable to believe what he was seeing, motionless. I invited him to join, with the young explorer still attached to me, with the piston losing strength inside. I turned to my side and we lay facing each other, closer together, not allowing Matus to move away. I threw my right leg over the boy. My partner, seeing this, wanted to join in too. He took his keyb and started trying the occupied entrance. Everything there was already starting to intertwine, and what looked like an octopus with its tentacles adjusted itself in the same space, escaping sometimes, but then returning in the best way possible. It was wonderful to receive this kind of attention. I have always been grateful for being born a woman. The only way I could feel this fullness. Honey, you better stay back there. The front is already busy, I said, looking back. And since the offer was very tempting, it was readily accepted in a few seconds. Now I found myself receiving 2 visitors who were demanding their stay, coming and going, moaning, coming back and leaving everything in disarray. I could no longer contain myself. I was the one who screamed the loudest, the one who cursed the most and wriggled her feet the most. I told them both that they were going to watch that woman giving herself over without control, and they seemed to like the idea. I screamed loudly for a long time, with my eyes closed, and soon after the toilets came, empty, delivering what was left. After that night, we went to another room, leaving Matus to his own devices. After a shower and without saying a word, he went to rest. We did the same, and the next day, we took him to the bus station. On the way, we asked him to keep everything confidential, that if it was just between us, there would be future opportunities. He was encouraged, and it seems to have worked out. Everything is the same as before, except for our married life, which has become significantly richer. Today, we are even closer.